Doesn't it make you a little angry when the technology doesn't work?
Yes. Makes me angry. Hello, everyone.
Greetings. We are here.
We're here. We're angry.
Take 2.
Get used to it.
So anyhow.
You were talking before we got cut off about how you lost a calf. This weekend.
It was.
So why don't you
we went out there
regale us
and
with
it
that
was.
story?
I don't know if it's a great story or necessarily, but I was, Sunday night, I went out to the pasture with my wife, and I was just commenting the day before on the mother of this calf. She's like a guarantee. Every calf is always healthy. She takes great care of them and everything. And then the next time we go out there, we can't find the calf, and she was very distressed. So the mother was she was freaking out.
Was the calf a boy or a girl?
This one is a bull calf. Yeah.
Okay.
So
you use the correct terminology.
yeah, it's a boy.
Is it a boy or a girl?
Yeah, and we can trust the science on that with calves. Anyhow, before I go off an entirely different tangent.
You gonna make some people angry?
So we went all around, Shelley and I drove around the entire pasture looking, and it got dark. And so I went back yesterday after the Memorial Day service, and I was searching all over the place and went all around the perimeter and through every bush and bramble out there. And I was getting really frustrated not finding it. And so, excuse me, anyway, I found the calf and came, as I was coming back up after spending the entire time. I was supposed to be painting the house and doing stuff with my wife. It was our work day that we were going to have. But instead I was looking for this calf. So I'd just given up, and I walk up and here's the calf laying, next to the lane after all of that, which I was excited for. That was good. The mother was very excited. The calf was very excited. Everybody's happy. And so anyway, I was talking to my grandson, Zachary. Took him for a little ride out there and showed him the cattle and where our new house is going to be. And so he's asking me what we're going to paint the house. Because we're supposed to be painting the old house, but when we build it, what color are we going to paint the house? And he suggested, and I haven't told Shelley this yet, so if she happens to hear this podcast, she'll get the new suggestion for how to paint the house. And I was kidding around with him. I said, maybe we should paint it Spider-Man colors. And Zachary said, you should paint it Hulk colors. It should be green and purple. Yeah, and that would be great because Hulk is the best. He loves the Hulk. And got to thinking about the fact that the Hulk is basically a rage monster. I mean, that's what he does, is uncontrolled passions, and his anger takes control of him, and he turns into this super-powered thing.
Listen, if this is going to be a Marvel podcast, I'm going to have to go. Because
I can go DC if you want, but...
I understand the premise of the Hulk.
But he didn't mention the painting of the house with DC characters.
I understand.
Although, I thought he was going to go Batman. He went Hulk.
Batman would be a little dreary for your house.
The thing about Hulk, I don't think we're going to do green and purple. I'm pretty sure.
That could also be Barney.
But don't get me started on Blue's Clues. So the whole thing with the Hulk is he's this brilliant scientist, mild-mannered professor type, until the anger takes control of him, and then it affords him great power, but the destructive force of it is overwhelming. So Hulk's never really been a true hero. He's more of an anti-hero, kind of modeled after Frankenstein's monster, where you don't have the control, you don't have the check, the character that guides this. You just have the emotions running wild.
Didn't in the later movies he figure out how to control it and do whatever?
Yeah, they had a series in the books of the Professor Hulk, and so at the end of Endgame, I think it was Endgame.
Spoiler alert.
He if you haven't seen it by now, you ain't gonna see it, right? So they have this scene, after all of the stuff that's going on, and he's got the best of both worlds.
He's intelligent, whatever, but he's the Hulk.
Yeah, so he's huge and green, but now he's in control of his emotions and stuff.
You ever think?
And he's actually got his clothes on because he must have had a good tailor for it.
Here's what I want to say real quick that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, because we always do that at some point. The Hulk.
Yes.
I saw that last scene. I've seen clips of Endgame and stuff on YouTube.
Hard not to.
Is it weird that I think he's better looking as the Hulk. Like in that version when he's intelligent.
Oh, well, yeah, the CGI helps smooth things
Right.
out. You know.
Like I thought the Beast was better looking as the Beast in Beauty and the Beast than when he became a human.
That's
get into.
Probably true.
Let's not
It
get
does
into
probably say a lot about you as well, but the.
Let's move on.
I will say I think Mark Ruffalo is the best Hulk that they've had. Not that he and I would agree on anything
What was the other one?
outside of the
Edward
character.
Norton, because he wouldn't be a good Hulk.
Edward Norton was good in his own right. The movie wasn't great, and Eric Bana I thought did a nice job as well. But good, not great. The movie wasn't great, but Mark Ruffalo brings more. Less moodiness as Banner, in my opinion. So you see more of a contrast between the personality types. Mark Ruffalo is really good at awkward. At the I'm kind of
Nerdy.
Self-deprecating and nerdy. Got the kind of the rough voice, rough exterior look, but yet still super nerdy. So I think it kind of worked out well. Truthfully, the best Bruce Banner ever was Bill Bixby back on the television series, way before
Bruce
your
Banner,
days,
Bill Bixby.
But
That's why.
yeah, could be, could very well be. But when his eyes turn green,
His eyes turn green. Is that a thing about the Hulk?
no, but it was in the
Oh.
it was in the TV show. He'd get angry. That's when the great line. Don't make me angry. You
Right.
wouldn't like me when I'm angry.
Right. Another anger pop culture figure that this sermon was making me think of was from Inside Out and the emotion of anger.
Oh yeah, for
And
sure.
now I forget who played that. Lewis Black? Yes. I think
That would
so.
make sense.
Yeah. I just think it's interesting how I'm sure there are other depictions that we're not thinking of famous angry people or whatever, angry depictions. But in that particular world, which was kind of a trip of a movie for kids, I thought, but
A lot of depth in it.
yes, which is why it's a trip of a movie for kids or
Mm-hmm.
adults. In that movie, every emotion, or at least the 4 or 5 that they focused on, one had to be in the driver's seat. That was the whole point of the thing. Until they figured out at the very end that they could play off each other and 2 could be in control or whatever. I thought that was interesting how, and I thought kind of correct, especially when it comes to like extreme emotions like anger or sadness. It's very easy to let that just control and drive you and drive what you do. So I thought that was pretty accurate.
No, that's good. I should have thought about that prior to the sermon, but I'm glad that you brought that out today.
Well, that's all I have
Because
to
that really
contribute.
is a good. It's a good picture that our emotions are always fighting for control.
Right.
And anger is a better fighter than the other
Right,
emotions,
right,
I guess.
right.
So
And it's like I think there were points in the movie where anger would like push the others out of the way and be like, "Let me do this," and da 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 da.
what was the sadness one called?
It was the lady from The Office. I forget what her name
What was
is.
the character called? Was it
Sadness.
Was
yeah.
it just
Yeah,
sadness?
they were just the names of their emotions. Yeah.
So like joy is easy,
Right.
But just the way she just would flop down. Sadness does that
Right.
in our lives so much. Depression. The word depression is such a good depiction of the emotion, and that you're pressed down.
Right. And she was just kind of
life is
frumpy
heavy.
and like
Yeah.
hunched over and whatever.
And there's a place in our lives for all of these emotions, and that's one of my favorite things about that movie. And there were things I probably didn't like about it, but I can't remember them because because there's always something I don't like.
I didn't like Bing Bong.
But the good things about it overwhelmed that. As you're dealing with
Right.
the idea of emotions and how they do wrestle for control. And as we mature, as we grow, we learn how to control those emotions rather than letting those emotions control us.
I read an article today that said emotions demand to be felt, but it's how you respond to that is what matters.
Absolutely.
You're not going to be able to control what emotions come, but
Yeah.
how you react to that is what matters.
I always will talk about the difference between the thermometer and the
Right.
thermostat, which I'm pretty sure I stole from Neil Anderson. He probably stole it from somebody else. I may have stolen it from somebody else. I don't know, but but the idea
Don't steal, kids.
that it is an indicator. Like
Right.
our emotions tell us something. There's something, some stimuli that we are responding to, and whatever those stimuli are, they're not invalid or not real. I mean, sometimes they are. Sometimes it's imaginary stimuli, but there's something that's pulling the trigger. And when that happens, we have to be in enough control of our faculties to say, well, wait a minute, this is or is not reality. This response is or is not appropriate, and be able to steer through that.
To control your emotions instead of letting them control you.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the thing. So, like you said, it's what you do about it is big. And one of the things that's been on my mind since Sunday.
It doesn't feel like Tuesday. It was Memorial Day yesterday, and I'm thrown off.
It is the fact that it's not just our actions in response that make something sinful or not sinful. Very often it's our motives, it's our attitude about it. So I can do all the right things outwardly that other people can see. I can, have happy, peppy Facebook posts or whatever, but still in my internal self, my motive is bad. And even when you look at Paul quoting the Old Testament passage saying that, do good to your enemy, and it's like heaping burning coals on their head. If my attitude is, I really want to heap burning coals on their head,
right,
then
kill them with kindness.
I'm already in a sinful state, even if no one else sees it. God does. And so that attitude, that motive within me can make a good action still bad. But I can't make a bad action good no matter how good my motives are. So if I do the wrong thing, even if I have a good attitude about it, even if I have the right reasons, there is no good way to do a bad thing. And that's one of the things that, as we look at anger in general, and anger's complex. And in some ways it's one of the more, I don't know if I could say it's the most complex emotion. I read somewhere that it's the most complex emotion. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but it's not far from it if it isn't. It's certainly, on the high end of complexity because there are so many different kinds of anger, so much, intensity. Well, I guess, when we look at things like, romantic love, there's a lot of complexity with that as well. And so the things that can lead into that can be horrifically destructive, or they can be wonderfully helpful in building families. So, with anger, I think this is one where we as Christ followers historically have a lot of confusing messages that we deal with. From, you should never, ever, ever, ever get angry for any reason, just be stoic all the time. Or, the far other extreme is, think of the alt-right extremist, crazy, white nationalists that people will talk about. Folks that will get all so bent out of shape that I'm just going to start swinging my Bible like a club, and I'm always angry about everything because the world is terrible.
What do you call it? What's that church that always pickets everything? Westboro Baptist.
Yeah. That's a picture of an angry Christian that totally justifying sinful anger and sinful attitudes and behaviors, and not that the things that they're angry about are always inappropriate. When you're angry about sin, that is right. But what they do with that is a whole other level, and the fact that they embrace the anger more. Nobody thinks of Westboro Baptist and says, "Oh wow, they really love Jesus." Right. They think, "Oh wow, they really hate people."
Right.
They really hate
They hate everybody.
And that's not what Jesus said. Right. He didn't say the world's gonna know that you're my disciples by your anger about things. That is exactly the opposite. And yet, sometimes we work so hard at suppressing that or alleviating or avoiding that anger that we don't fight, that we don't stand up. And that's not real either. We have to live in reality as it is, not as we wish it were. So if we're going to connect the reality of God to the realities of everyday life, and our experiences are going to cause anger at times. We're going to have things that just set us off, that push our buttons. And it's appropriate. Parenting, as a parent of a young child, you probably have some emotions that go through your mind every once in a while. Because there's one thing
it's like this every day.
There's one thing that I know about young children is they can push your buttons.
All of
and sometimes at the same time, like you are
like they're
so
on an elevator
adorable. I
going,
love you so much, and I want to destroy you right now.
Oh, golly.
And then you deal with the guilt from all the negative feelings, and
I never have guilt.
Especially, I think it's worse as a single parent because you don't
horrible.
have a partner there with you.
You feel
to
like you're
bounce it off
constantly
of.
failing.
Right, and it's mostly because you are. Because we
Thank
are
you.
all
I'm just gonna
constantly
go
failing.
jump off a bridge now.
Don't feel bad. I'm constantly failing too.
And your kids are mostly grown.
Yeah, that's now I've got a whole new generation to fail with. So life is like baseball. Parenting is like baseball. You're going to fail the majority of the time. You keep learning from it and going forward. And when I say fail the majority of the time, I'm speaking slightly hyperbolically as we're going through life.
But mostly realistic.
But we have to redefine the win, because sometimes a foul ball is the best thing you could do in the situation.
Right.
You're just not going to get a hit out of it. For you non-sports lovers, you're in the wrong podcast.
That's
Sorry.
me. So I'm in the wrong podcast.
No, you're playing softball this week. You're
false.
You're taking my spot.
False. 100% false. I might swing by and say hello. I wish they served hot dogs
But
there.
you did play softball. I know this.
Wouldn't
to
we
be
call
sure.
it playing? Oh,
Yes.
you mean I played it like when I was a
saw
kid.
pictures of you when you were a kid.
I played it for quite a while, like several years,
Yes.
and then it got scary.
And
Because
sometimes other parents got nasty too.
Pitchers
but
got
that's another
faster,
story.
and then we're hitting
Yeah.
people, and I'm like, no, I ain't doing this. It ain't worth it. So I
Right.
joined the marching band.
See?
Anyway,
Another sport.
I did that solely so I could get out of gym. If you did 4 years of marching, you didn't have to take gym.
Yeah, you got to spend some time at football games.
Yeah, right. That was riveting.
That was your primary motive, right?
Yes. The other day,
We were talking about important things, weren't we?
now I'm going to go back and talk about my child. He's important. He's
Yes. The button pusher.
the button pusher, who I feel like is probably not going to play sports. He's not that athletically inclined as a 3-year-old.
Is anybody really as
There
a
are
3-year-old?
some who are like super
Okay, my
into
grandson
sports.
Levi, but that's...
But they're like super, like you can tell if a kid is going to be into sports. George is into
Sometimes.
like music. I think he's going to be musically inclined. Big surprise.
I wonder why that would be.
What was that? Something just fell in front of me.
I think it was a giant fly.
No, it was like a
Alien?
hair or something from above.
It's
Anyway,
not good.
the ceiling is
The sky is falling. The sky is
It's
falling.
going off the rails. Anyway,
We have rails? That would have helped a lot.
the other day,
Or training wheels.
the other day, my child, who has training wheels.
The other day.
I thought I had a failing moment. I thought
Nice picture of him on the tricycle, by the way. That was
he was just
adorable.
watching the people go by.
Adorable.
Things keep falling, Rich.
I gotta tell you, I'm not seeing them, so
I'm losing it.
don't know what to say.
Tell me if you see it on the video.
Although I am blind, so that's probably a factor.
I thought that I had kind of a bad day, and I thought that I was doing not a great job as a parent. I thought, because I yelled at him, and he wasn't listening, and blah blah blah. So at the end of the day, we were just sitting on the couch, kind of relaxing, and he goes, "Mommy, we're very lucky today." I said, "Oh, we're very lucky. Why are we lucky?" And he goes, "It was Saturday." And he goes, "Because there was no school today, and we had nothing to do, and we just got to be home all day, Mommy and Georgie." And he goes, "I love you, Mommy." And so I effectively went into the kitchen and wept. But that's what I'm saying. Like these up and down things where you feel like you're failing. And then I've probably failed 5 minutes later. But
that would make you normal.
yeah, but I don't know, getting back on track here, but
Well,
that's
I
another
think,
emotion that,
I think that's part of the whole complication of
Right.
this. Because when we're talking about anger, it really represents all of our emotions. Whenever our emotions are in control, we're in a bad spot.
Right.
And so the devil is going to use things like that. Anger, lust, depression, guilt, all these things to look for that foothold that Paul is admonishing us not to let him have. And so the focus verse for the sermon Sunday was Ephesians 4:26 and 27. In your anger, do not sin. Don't let the sun go down while you're still angry.
By the way, every time you said that, I had Elton John in my head. Every time.
It happened to me a lot as well.
I was like, ugh.
But don't let the sun go down while you're still angry, and don't give the devil a foothold. And these things all are part and parcel of the same package. So the devil's constantly looking to gain that traction, that place where he can get. I saw it that time.
Thank
What is
you.
happening?
I don't know.
I think there's a fly that's catching
Okay.
the light is what's happening. Anyhow, I don't know how because it's like 50 degrees in here. But anyway, the idea here is that when we hold on to this anger and we let it settle in and we let it have control of us, so that now we're not controlled by the Spirit, we're controlled by our feelings. And even in an Old Testament setting, we see Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 talking about trusting the Lord with all our heart, not leaning on our own understanding, but submitting to Him in everything so that He then straightens our paths. That's an Old Testament equivalent to walking by the Spirit. And if we walk according to the Spirit, then we won't gratify the desires of the flesh. We saw that a couple weeks ago.
I thought also this came up on my Facebook memories today from 2016, and it was from Ephesians 4.
There you go.
And it was, get rid of all anger, bitterness, rage and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other just as in Christ God forgave you. So we were doing Ephesians 4 in 2016.
So Paul is summarizing in that what he's saying in the rest of this paragraph about, or a couple of paragraphs depending on your translation. So this idea of anger is bigger than just don't get angry, and it's not. I am still astonished. I had heard this before. I was surprised at how many published commentaries or known preachers' sermons making this sound like Paul is saying that you should be angry. You know, be angry. There's lots of reasons to be angry. Be angry, as if it's a command, which is not. It's neither logical nor grammatically necessary. That what he's saying here is not an imperative, but a concession. It's an acknowledgement. You're going to be angry. That's gonna happen. It's like him saying, be breathing. Well, duh.
When you breathe,
he doesn't have to command you to breathe if you're breathing, right? So the same kind of thing here. When we're dealing with emotions, we're going to have emotions, but what we can't do is let those emotions take over. They're, whether you're talking about a kid in driver's ed or our general principle of life, don't let your emotions drive. So, when you have a kid learning to drive, my daughter's taking driver's ed this summer, and from Mr. G's, Steve Graziano.
He taught me.
So
taught me how to go through the drive-through.
Man, I feel so old now. But anyhow, when
that was what we had to do. We had to go through drive-throughs. Cozille, pull into this.
Did you have to buy for him? Because
no.
Then he missed a great opportunity.
I got double.
This is part of the thing here. So for you to get this, I need this burger.
No, I got double because I worked for his family, but while I was taking driver's ed,
right, yeah.
And so he'd come into the pizza place and I'd be making pizza. Cozille, move over. You're not doing this right.
You probably made the Steve special for me at one point.
Oh yeah, probably did.
Underneath,
I'm sure. Anyway,
anyhow, so as we're looking at this, a child learning to drive has got all kinds of emotions: the nerves, the stress, the frustration, the anger. Well, to become a good driver, you learn to control those emotions rather than letting them dictate how you drive. And when you see people in Three Oaks on Memorial Day weekend who are constantly angry behind the wheel.
Or walking on Three Oaks Road in the middle of the road.
Oh, my goodness gracious. My father-in-law pulled out of the side street by us, pulled out of Beach Street. And he's going, and he's probably going 25.
That is the speed limit.
It didn't take long for him to get up to that. This
nice person.
Guy.
Wonderful fellow.
This, who I definitely was not going to say clown, who was coming at, had to be 35 minimum.
Oh, he was driving.
From the downtown business area.
Okay.
It comes up right up on Gary's bumper. Never should have been close to him if the guy's going the speed limit. And he's angry because Gary's in his way. Whips out through this, no passing downtown thing, and whips around him and passes him. He's letting his emotions drive, and bad things happen when you do that. Somebody gets their dog run over or their kid run over because you're being stupid in your emotions, and that's what happens in a grand sense. To use that just kind of as a metaphor, when we let anger drive, then it puts the devil behind the wheel. It lets him take control.
And we don't immediately think of the consequences from that.
But
there are always, whether they're big or small, they're always.
The driving's a perfect example.
Right.
You're not at this point. I'm just mad.
Right.
You've blocked my goal, and I'm angry, and so I'm going to whip around you. I'm probably going to blare on my horn, and my focus is on you. My focus is on my anger right now, not on the possibility of
an accident,
whatever else is going on around me. Some kid running out because it's a residential neighborhood. I'm not focused on what's going on in your life and why, if you may be driving slowly because you just lost your father.
Right.
Who knows? Any number of different things that are going on. But I'm focused only on this
How I feel.
hulking rage
Right.
monster inside of me. And when we do that, that's exactly why the devil keeps putting us in these situations whenever he can. Whatever he can do to gain an advantage. It's a strategic advantage that he's looking for. And God uses the same things that the devil uses to shipwreck us, God uses to shape us. He's already aware of that. There's no trick that the devil pulls out of his playbook that God hasn't already ordained and planned to be part of his greater plan for our good and his glory.
Right.
So as we do this, our focus as Christ followers, and I guess this is one of the things I want to always make sure that we're getting at, is Paul's not talking to unbelievers.
Right.
If your life is governed by your flesh and not by the Spirit of God, which it cannot be governed by the Spirit of God if you're outside of Christ, if you're outside of the family of God. But if I'm governed by the flesh, well, then all of the self-control in the world isn't going to make me right with God. Now, that doesn't mean I shouldn't have self-control,
Right.
but it means I'm going to be working at having better flesh rather than walking according to God's Spirit.
Sounds gross when you put it that way.
Yeah, well, there are just some words that are trigger words for you. But if we, as Christ followers, we want to reflect the reality of Christ. We want to show his character in everything that we do. And we know that Jesus got angry. We see that more than once in Scripture.
Right.
But the anger never drove him. It never ruled him. His character ruled the anger that came up. So Christ's anger was always perfectly aligned with God's will. Right. He was angry about sin, and yet it never diminished the fact that he loved those people that were committing these things.
I mean, you can look back in the Old Testament and see that God got angry.
Right, with Israel.
Right.
I mean, repeatedly. So the same God who is rich in love,
right.
abounding in mercy, does not let the wicked go unpunished. And when he's dealing with his own people, it was his love that drove his anger,
right.
not the other way around. He
didn't just get angry to have a temper tantrum.
Right. And so God's wrath is not like our
right.
wrath. When we're looking at the different things that we're dealing with, as a mother, as a parent, it is important. It's not just appropriate. It is important for you to be angry about certain things in defense of your child, in the discipline of your child. There are things that just should not be, and that ought to bring a certain type of anger. That does not mean we let that anger take control. That's when it becomes abusive. That's when it becomes, inconsistent and unstable. But it should raise a sort of ire in us as we're dealing with things. But if the anger controls us, then we're not disciplining our child, right? Then we're punishing and going beyond. And I want to differentiate between punishment and retribution for an evil act, and discipline, which is the shaping of a life. And so as a parent, my anger shouldn't be driving me toward retribution.
Right.
Society will do that.
Right.
Reality will do that. My love for my child should drive my anger so that, right. just as God was angry with Israel and said, because I love you, and I chose you to be mine, I've set you apart for myself, I have trained you, you are in rebellion against me, and I am angry.
I think that's an important point. Like with George, with my child, if I punish him for something or discipline him for something, I explain beforehand and afterward why I did that. And I don't want to do that. I say, I don't want to do this. I hate this, but this is what we have to do. Da, 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 da. I think the biggest picture of Jesus getting angry that sticks out in my mind is when he goes to the temple,
right.
and overturns the tables and things like that. But it is for a purpose. It's not just I'm mad because this, and this.
Right.
That he was disciplining in a sense. I mean, he was showing them this is what it's supposed to be. And so I think
it was necessary.
Right.
It was in defense of the poor.
Right.
It was in the defense of God's name and his honor, and that was appropriate.
Right. So is there an argument to be made that I think we automatically associate anger with being a negative thing, but there's a time and place for it when you've got the right underlying motives.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's necessary. A soldier in war needs a certain type of anger that can easily get out of control. We see that happen all the time. Right. But without a certain type of anger, you're not going to be effective, and you're probably not going to survive. So God gives us emotions to take us to certain places that we need to be in a particular area. Fear, for example.
Right.
We don't want to have fear, but God gives us fear on purpose because sometimes we need that. The fight or flight thing has to kick
Right.
in. And so for survival, we need a certain fear.
Right.
But we can't be dominated by fear, or we also can't survive. Joy is something that's good, but it's not. It can't be the dominant or only
Well,
emotion.
that was the premise of Inside Out. At the end, they discovered that joy couldn't drive all the time,
Right.
and sadness was needed.
Yeah, you got to have both.
Right.
And so if we recognize that all of the emotions that we feel in themselves they're really more tools than anything else. It's not that any of these emotions are evil in themselves,
Right.
but what they do in us, if we leave them to be uncontrolled, it's going to be a very, very bad situation. Right. So, yeah, there are lots of applications of positive anger. Anger is a part of the emotion that drives a competitive nature. It's part of the emotion that drives us to fight against injustice, to stand up for the weak. If I see somebody, who is, beating up a little old lady in the street, I'm going to get angry,
right.
and that anger is going to cause me to act. But that anger has to be tempered by not just my anger and outrage with the injustice, but my love for the victim
Right.
as well.
I think the bottom line is, with all this, is it just can't be in control.
It can't
be driving you. You have to be.
And that's really Paul's point. That's what he's getting
Right.
at. Is if I let it control me, if I let it drive, then the devil gets the wheel. He's going to be the one that's taking us where he wants us to go rather than where God wants us to go. So as we're doing it, we have to recognize that there's more to this than whatever it is that has us angry. Mm-hmm. And that's where anger tends to distract us, is it gets us focused on this temporal realm. It takes us out of our purpose of being ambassadors for Christ, of recognizing, like the old lady TikTok video that you showed me.
The old lady TikTok video.
that this is a moment in time.
A blip.
Less than 100 years,
right.
as she said, to eternity.
Right.
And we have to live with eternity
She said
in
it's
mind.
not going to amount to a hill of beans, which is
My
one of
mom
my
loved
favorite
that as well.
expressions.
Yeah, that was good. But if we look at God's intent for his church, his purpose for us here, it's to love through his church. And we use the somewhat cheesy acronym on Sunday because, sometimes I like a cheesy acronym here and there. If we look at love as the acronym for let others view eternity, God intends to let others view eternity through his church. We are their picture of him. And if we let our anger because somebody was taking too long at the drive-through, or doesn't move when the green light turns, or whatever, they're standing too close to us at the grocery store. I see somebody without a mask, or I see somebody with a mask when I think it's inappropriate, and I get focused on these temporal things, then I'm distracted from the fact that the only reason that I'm here is to bring glory to God. And I do that by loving others, by reflecting the reality of Christ's character in every single relationship that I have, whether it's an intimate relationship or a passing relationship, whatever it is. But if I let that distract me, then I'm not going to be fulfilling my purpose. And that's pretty crucial for us. So, we need to keep in mind, like you said, don't let it control. And if we hold on to it, we're going to let it control us. I mean, that's the longer it stays with us, the more control it has, the bigger the handle is that the devil gets to take hold of. And the sooner we deal with it, and I do mean deal with it. I don't mean suppress it. I mean, if there is a cause, we need to address that cause. We need to speak frankly, speak the truth in love. If someone has wronged us, particularly if it's a brother or sister in Christ, then we need to address that with them as family, as siblings in Christ. Honestly, not with passive-aggressive silliness, not with sarcasm and retorts, but hey, what you did, that hurt me, or I don't think that was right, so that we can talk through this and get it dealt with. And if we don't get it dealt with, it's just going to fester. Right. Negative emotions. Les and Leslie Parrott say this in their marriage materials. negative emotions that get buried have a high rate of resurrection.
Right.
Eventually, it comes back. And if you've seen any zombie movies, which I don't watch zombie movies, but you understand the principle. When they come back from the dead, they are destructive.
Right.
That's what happens with our negative emotions
Just
that
emotions.
are
Like that Bee Gees song.
nice. Yeah, I have.
It's
Don't,
just emotion.
I don't think I've heard you quote the Bee Gees before.
Oh, I love the Bee Gees.
That's good stuff.
You know Bob Ross.
Yeah, not
I mean,
personally,
not
but
personally, cool, because he's dead.
yeah, former senior NCO in the Air Force. So
Yeah, well, that's what I'm going to bring up. Do you know he died when he was only 52?
I did not know that. Guess how old I am?
Yee. He was a big smoker.
I am not.
So there you go.
He also had hair, and I do not.
Well, see, you're nowhere near.
It's entirely possible that the hair is the deciding factor there. But anyway,
entirely possible.
Bob Ross.
He also had a pet squirrel. You're out.
Not likely to do that.
He was a master sergeant in the military, and he spent that time.
Specifically the Air Force. Let's not leave that important detail out.
He was a master sergeant in the Air Force.
All hail the Zoomies.
And my dogs get the Zoomies every night. And so I read a quote from him, and I'm going to misquote it, obviously, but he basically said during that time, he was the guy that had to scream at people and, say, do this, clean that, blah, blah, blah. And so he spent many years. Not the
picture that you normally
Well, that's the point. That's what he was making. So he made a decision after he got out of the military for yelling at people and, criticizing them for so many years that he was never going to raise his voice again. And so the Bob Ross that we all know was just this very calm, happy trees kind of guy. And so I thought that's really kind of an interesting picture because I'm sure that Bob Ross got angry, and I don't know what he did in his personal life. I know that he was married thrice.
You know way more about Bob Ross than I do.
I really like Bob Ross. His second wife died.
He's supremely popular right now.
So I just thought that was interesting that he said, I'm not going to let this take control anymore, because I think it would have been very easy, like you mentioned earlier with military people in particular, that you get used to being kind of ingrained in that lifestyle where everything's kind of intense, and then you step out of it.
I think he was if I'm not mistaken, I think he was a drill instructor.
Yeah. So he's yelling at people.
And in the Air Force, that's a full-time gig.
Right.
Army.
And I don't know how many years he did it, but he was master sergeant. I imagine several. So yeah, but for him to make just that conscious decision, I'm done with that. I'm not going to get angry anymore. And because of that, he's very therapeutic to a lot of people just watching his show. But that's kind of
a very calming voice.
Yeah, and he's got a pet squirrel, so what's not to like? Anyway, that's kind of a weird way to end the show, but I just thought that was a picture of controlling that.
Why should the ending be different than
That's
anything
true.
else? We have
so control your anger. Be like Bob Ross. Be like Paul.
Well, yeah, just remember the mercy that we received. My anger toward others, the bitterness that I hold on to, that resentment, that unforgiveness.
We didn't even talk about resentment.
That whole deal, that negates and forgets that I've been forgiven an unpayable debt. Whatever some other sinner does to me as a sinner is small in comparison to what I've done to a holy God.
Well, that's what I was trying to get in the song that I wrote.
Yeah, I thought you captured it really well.
Because I've done horrible things to other people, just in general, whatever, I'm sure.
Was that the second verse? Or?
That was the bridge.
It was great.
Thanks. But when you realize that all the horrible things that I've done, that's been taken care of, then how can I hold on to anything, And I'm guilty of it. I've done that. Like we've talked about before, I've been through a pretty gnarly marriage and divorce and whatever, and I held on to things for a long time. I held on to things with friends and blah, blah, blah. But it's not doing me any favors. It's just hurting myself.
Drinking poison, thinking the other person's going to die.
Right.
And Jesus was very direct about it. That the logic of that is pretty obvious, pretty simple. But he went so far as to say, if you don't forgive your brother or sister from your heart, whoever it is that wronged you, if you don't get that right in your heart, if you don't come to terms with that and extend grace, God will not forgive you. God will not give you grace.
And you told me this before a few years ago. You said, forgiveness, means forgiveness, but you don't have to be stupid. Yeah. Like, just because you forgive somebody doesn't mean you're going to let them continuously hurt you or whatever.
I'm letting them off my hook, but that doesn't mean I'm going to stand in their crosshairs either.
Right. I think we get that confused a lot.
It's okay to duck.
Right. I think we get that confused a lot. Like, if I forgive them, that means I'm just going to let them walk all over me again.
Yeah.
That's a fine line.
There are a lot of, that gets kind of complicated in a
Right.
lot of ways, but, you see that in abuse situations
Right.
when we have this codependency that happens, that it's not, because really what ends up happening in those situations is very seldom actually forgiveness. We don't
Sure, right.
actually forget that and let that go and cancel that debt. We just keep it in our pocket.
Right.
But I have to come back to this. I have to let it keep happening. And that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing, we'll probably inevitably throughout throughout June, have various references that will inevitably come up due to LGBTQ plus XYZ Pride Month. And if that sounded dismissive, I almost apologize. But I just have a real
someone's gonna be angry.
problem with any celebration of sin, period. That the entire, I kind of now lost track of where I was going, but as we're processing these things, the anger about the sin is appropriate, but it has to be governed by, not just tempered by, it has to be governed by a love for the person. If I'm angry because you sin and your sin looks different than my sin, then I am the one in sin. I've missed it. But as we're dealing with these things, and I will confess, I get angry every time a new, local pride, Harbor Country Pride, which is not Pride in Harbor Country, it's Gay Pride in Harbor Country. Every time I see one of these signs in my neighborhood, there's an anger that comes up in me, and I have to choose to let that go, because not because the anger is inappropriate, but because it holds me captive.
Right.
Not someone
Nobody else cares if you're.
And it keeps me from, if I'm focused on that anger, it keeps me from loving these folks who are hurting themselves. And if I actually care about God's will, then I need to love these people, not support what is hurting them. And that's where this kind of came from, is back to what you were saying about I can forgive. That doesn't mean I have to go along with it.
Right.
You punch me in the face, I can turn you the other cheek. But
Doesn't mean I'll let you punch me again.
it is okay to duck.
Right.
That's not the point that Jesus is making.
Right.
His point was you need to go above and beyond what is logical to you. That's the entire point of turn the other cheek. Walk an extra mile when you're carrying the soldier's gear. You need to do these things that are illogical in the flesh, that go beyond. But it is not in any way to say you need to stand there and be a target and say, please do harm to me.
Right.
Instead, what I need to be doing is demonstrating love. I need to go out of my way to love. In the same way, when we have people that we care about who are in sin, we don't just say, hey, you're good, go ahead, keep on doing it, because that's the opposite of love. If we love someone, then we need to be truthful. We need to be honest. Hey, when you hit me, that's bad. That's not okay. Because I'm not loving them if I allow them to continue in sin unchecked without doing something about that.
Right.
So there are complicated issues that come out of many of these things. They're not nearly as complicated as we make them, but because of our own sinfulness and our own hearts, it makes things more complicated than it actually is. We were doing pretty well on time, and I just wrecked that.
No, you're good. I think that was important, and it kind of gives a little more insight into what we're.
And we've pretty much become a 45-minute podcast anyway, so.
Don't say that, because then we'll go to like an hour. And I ain't got the time. We would have been more on time if we wouldn't have struggled with our little setup here. But you guys didn't see that part. So, never happened.
And yet we're still at 44 minutes and we haven't signed off.
I'm sorry. So. Now I'm rambling. Thank you guys for listening.
Rambling is what we do best.
That's our Patreon episode that you have to pay for. Today, this
everybody really wants
this
that.
would have been a great episode for something to rant about, the anger one. Yeah. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email us at somethingreal@reallifeonline.org, or you can leave us a message on Facebook or YouTube, or we do have a Twitter now, which is somethingrealp1 on Twitter, and there's a Real Life Community Church Twitter account as well, so you can look that up while you're on the tweeting platform. Did I say a voicemail? You can leave us a voicemail on the Anchor app if you use that for your podcasts, or at the church here itself, which is 269-756-RLCC. If you listen on iTunes or whatever platform you listen on, be sure to give us a rating or comment. That really helps to boost the algorithm and get us out there to other people. So the video content, if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, if you want to comment or share, that helps as well. If you find any of this useful or
intellectually stimulating,
yeah,
spiritually edifying,
or if you just like random pop culture references,
there you go.
Who doesn't? And we will stop there. I think I'm going to go back.
If you want to talk about who the best Hulk was, that's fine.
Email Rich directly for that one, because I'm out. Since one calls the heart is off, I have nothing to talk about, nothing to contribute. Thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you next week.